How's it going, folks? Hawking with Topdon. Today we are going to do a webinar on J2534. Hopefully, my audio and my video is all working correctly here. What we're going to take you through is some basic information about the RLink tools that we offer. We're also going to talk about J2534 programming, and some of this knowledge is going to be specifically about the tools themselves. Some of it is going to be more general in nature with regards to the overall subject of J2534 and programming. There are a lot of very important things we need to understand specifically about J2534 before we're ready to hook up to a car and get started. Unfortunately, if you don't have any training on the subject, you can get yourself into a fair bit of trouble without that base knowledge. So, today we're going to try to give you some of that base knowledge so you have a better understanding of what you need to do before you go ahead and start hooking your R-Link up to a car and performing programming. So, I'm going to switch over to my slideshow here. Bear with me just for a moment. All righty. Hopefully, everybody can see that. Yep, looks like everybody can see it. Good. All right. So, we are now going to just going to move my slideshow over to the other screens here so I can see it okay. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is talk about the hardware itself. So, if you're not familiar, Topdon currently offers two solutions. We have the RLink J2534, which is the tool you are looking at on the screen right now. And then we also have the RLink Lite. So, the first thing we're going to do is talk just a little bit about the RLink J2534. So the RLink J2534 is the lowest cost entry point to get into J2534 programming with regards to the Topdon channel of tools. What's in the box? So what you're going to get with the RLink J2534 is you get the physical tool itself. You get a nice carry case with padding and things of that nature. You also get a cable that comes with it for connecting it to your PC. Now, one very important thing to keep in mind is the cable that comes with this particular unit is a proprietary cable. Now, you're probably asking yourself, well, it's a USB-C connection on the dongle itself. Why are we using a proprietary cable? There is a good reason for this. If you're not familiar with USB cables as a whole, especially these days with USB-C related cables, cables can actually be either a charging cable or they can be a charging and data cable. And it's important to understand that if you use just a charging cable, you're not going to be able to talk to the device. So they designed this particular cable to be obviously a data cable, which ensures that you cannot accidentally plug in a charging cable to this unit and then be confused as to why you can't talk to the dongle. So just bear in mind that, again, the cable that comes with the unit is a specialized cable that has notches on it, specifically designed to prevent you from using the wrong uh, well, that's weird. I don't know why that says top-down oscilloscopes in the bottom. That's incorrect. But that is one of the reasons why it is important to understand um, why we have a proprietary cable. Now, the good news is the proprietary cable is in fact available as a replacement should you damage your cable. So don't worry about that. If you do damage it, just give a phone call into the support line and they can help you out and get you a replacement. Now you also see there is a extension piece cable here that is provided if there are any issues getting the dongle in plugged into the DLC on the car. You have that little extension breakout there just for that purpose if you should need it. So pretty straightforward, really not a long list of stuff here, just a few notes there that you want to keep in mind. So here is a overall list of all of the different protocols that are supported by the RLink J2534. It's pretty broad-based coverage. It does support the vast majority of modern protocols that are found on most vehicles. The very important one I do want to point out here that you do need to be aware of is the one that is highlighted here in the other color, does not support FEPS programming. And FEPS is 18-volt programming voltage sent out on pin 13 for certain Ford vehicles. We'll give you another slide on this in just a little bit, but just want to clarify the RLink J2534 does not support FEPS voltage. So if you are working on a Ford and you look at the data link connector, look at pin 13 on the data link connector. If there's a pin in pin 13, it means it is most likely going to use FEPS, and the RLink J2534 is not going to work for you. So just keep that in mind. So now let's talk about the RLink Lite. So the RLink Lite is really the professional level tool. This is the tool that's recommended for anybody who's doing all makes, all models, working on cars every day. This also has additional functionality. In the near future, the RLink Lite will also support remote diagnostic functions. So that means if you have a friend who has an RLink Lite who is a distributor and a professional expert who has years and years and years of programming experience and training, they may be able to help you specifically by accessing your box remotely, doing a peer to peer connection. So, just an additional feature on the RLink Lite. Now, here's just some other pictures of it. You can see we've got an OBD style port there. We've got an Ethernet port, we have a USB port, and then we have a power plug. The Ethernet port and the power plug are actually used for updating the firmware and the software on the RLink Lite itself. So you want to keep in mind on a semi-regular basis, I would recommend at least once a week, I would recommend you plug in your RLink Lite into Ethernet, so directly into your wall, and plug in the power supply cord that comes with it, and then let the unit do any necessary updates. Now, there's two different ways of updating it. That's one way you need to keep it updated. The second way you update it is through the PC software itself. So just keep that in mind. Two different ways to update this particular unit since it has additional capabilities. Now, what's in the box for the RLink Lite? In the RLink Lite, we have obviously our nice padded carrying case. We have a power adapter to power up the box, charge the box because it does have an internal battery, and also provide power during any updating process with that Ethernet. We also have a USB cable, which is a nice high quality USB cable. We have a 5-meter network cable, which of course is going to be used, number one, if you are plugging it in for updating it, when number two, if you were to use it for any remote services. We also have the OBD cable, which is for plugging into the RLink itself, and then the data link connector on the car. So then going over the protocols, again, you see all the same protocols you see with the RLink J2534 with some expansion. And of course, the most important one we have highlighted here is the FEPS 18 volts. Again, this is for Ford specifically, and we'll do one more slide on this in just a short bit. So what kind of benefits do we have for J2534? So J2534 is a widely supported programming, I guess you could say, technology. It's kind of both a standard as well as a protocol, right? And so basically, J2534 is essentially the vehicle manufacturers are providing a software that will talk to a generic hardware, such as a J2534 like the RLink Lite or the RLink J2534. And then their software will talk to that and allow you to program a car. In previous, before J2534 came about, you always had to buy the OEM dongle from the vehicle manufacturer or their supplier. Now, there are still certain circumstances where you may still need the OEM hardware, but in the vast majority of cases, you will be able to do it with a J2534, such as either of the R-Links. Now, there is some legislation in the United States that supports the J2534 standardization. That is called right to repair legislation. If you're in the United States, I will give you a QR code on the next slide here that will show you how you can support this legislation and lend your support. It is very important that if you are in the United States that you do reach out, fill out the I support J2534 and right to repair legislation forms and send those off to your Congress people because this ensures that we are going to have access to this through all the vehicle manufacturers in at least in most cases. There in our other countries there are efforts to make something like this happen. Australia, for instance, they are working to try and bring right to repair legislation there. And it may be also happening in other countries that I'm not aware of. So just keep in mind that that is an important thing to be aware of. A number of vehicle manufacturers offer short term subscriptions to their software, and some of those softwares are J2534 compliant. Again, in the United States, most of them do provide the means to do so. In other countries, it's hit or miss as far as which software is supported and which ones don't. The RLink, however, is highly compatible with the vast majority of these. Now, in the United States, you can find the software on OEMOneStop.com or through the NASTF website. And we'll talk a little bit about NASTF here in just a moment. It is also beneficial that because a lot of the vehicle manufacturers now sell short term subscriptions to their software, you can rent the software for a short period of time and perform whatever necessary programming operations you need without having to buy a yearly subscription to a given vehicle manufacturer. Again, in the vast majority of cases, at least in the context of the United States. It is important to remember that because we have access to this, we always want to use the legitimate means to do the programming. So if the vehicle manufacturer provides a pathway for you to purchase that software and use it, then you should be using that method. Here is the slide for supporting right to repair legislation. So again, if you're in the United States, I would encourage you to hit this QR code with your phone and jump on the right to repair legislation and send in your support. Again, this is very important to our field, and it is important that we show our support. The other thing you might keep in mind is if you are in another country where you don't have this, you might want to take a look at this anyway and potentially consider bringing this to the attention of your local government. So if you don't have something like this in your country, it would be a good idea to take a look at what's being done here in the United States and potentially bring this up to your governing bodies in your jurisdiction. Obviously, this brings a lot of benefits. And if you could achieve something like that in your region, of course, that would be beneficial for you as well. So you're curious, okay? What am I going to do with J2534? What am I going to do with the RLink Lite or the RLink J2534? It's important to keep in mind that newer vehicles now are much more advanced than they've been in the past. The number of control modules we have on a vehicle, the amount of software involved in vehicle operation, all of that is significantly more detailed and in depth than it has ever been. Now, there's a lot of considerations as to why we need that J2534 hardware. Many new vehicles now, when they come out, have proprietary hardware on them or proprietary software. Again, depending on your region, the vehicle manufacturers may or may not cooperate with a scan tool manufacturer, such as Topdon, to provide diagnostic data and programming information in order for the aftermarket scan tool to be able to work with those new technologies on a vehicle. However, it's important to understand that during those engineering processes to make the scan tool work with those new technologies, that takes time. So, if you're not familiar or you haven't run across it before, in the vast majority of cases, you will see an aftermarket scan tool will usually have anywhere between 6 months to 18 months of lag before the scan tool itself will be capable of doing all of the functions that you may need on a given vehicle in order to do something even as simple as a battery replacement or a brake job, like with electronic parking brakes. Of course, as a diagnostic tool manufacturer, Topdon works very hard to try and provide that as soon as possible. However, it is again a lot of engineering work to get that software built so that it works correctly. So, if you are working on a new vehicle, let's say a 2025 or a 2026, and you hook up your Topdon scan tool and you're not able to do something, if you have an RLink Lite, for instance, and you buy a short term subscription to the vehicle manufacturer's diagnostic software, you may be able to perform those functions that you need using your dongle, the RLink, in conjunction with that OEM software on a short term subscription. So if the aftermarket scan tool can't get the job done, perhaps you can use your RLink with the OEM software in order to accomplish that needed function. So just keep that in mind. Again, opening more doors for possible things you can do with the hardware. It's also important to keep in mind a lot of vehicle manufacturers have now implemented what we would refer to as secure gateway infrastructure. So this means that in order to retrieve, not to retrieve codes typically, but in order to clear codes or perform any kind of special functions or bidirectional controls or things like that, the secure gateway technology may prevent you from being able to do that. Now, again, this is another scenario where the aftermarket scan tools, we're doing everything we can to try and make sure that our tools are capable of this. Again, it's a bureaucratic process. It takes time before the aftermarket scan tool manufacturer can gain access to these secure gateway technologies. There are many different things that have to be sorted out, not only from a software engineering perspective, but also from a bureaucratic standpoint. So, if you get on a new vehicle and let's say it has a secure gateway, and your aftermarket scan tool is unable to unlock it to perform something simple or basic like, hey, I need to do a electronic parking brake job, calibration, or backing the pads off, pushing the pads back out, or an ADAS calibration, and you can't do that with your aftermarket scan tool. Again, if we get a short-term subscription to the OEM software and use our RLink, we should be able to unlock that gateway using the software. The other thing you want to keep in mind, where there is some added benefit here for using your R-Link, is many vehicle manufacturers integrate diagnostic service information into their software. Now, what does that mean? You think about it's typically, if you're familiar, and if you're not, you'll find out. The German manufacturers like to integrate diagnostic information into their factory software. So, a great example of this would be Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen, Audi, and of course, a wide variety of others. But what they will do is integrate what they call a test plan. So, basically, your R Link would be used as the interface to connect to the car. We would boot up the software from Volkswagen or Mercedes or BMW, whoever we've purchased the software from. And then once we've connected to the car, we would scan the car and the software will actually calculate a test plan. When it calculates this test plan, it may provide a wide variety of different information that makes fixing the car easier. It may produce things like self tests. It may give you wiring diagrams, component locations, so many different things like that. Again, this is very common with the German manufacturers. So it's very important to understand that having that RLink Lite may really enable you to have an easier time with diagnosis. You purchase a short term subscription to BMW software, you use your RLink Lite, and now fixing that BMW becomes a lot more straightforward than when you have just a fault code definition and little else to go on. Like I said, might speed up your diagnostic process quite a bit, right? Now, some other things we want to understand here when it comes to programming, specifically in relation to J2534. Vehicle security, of course, is integrated into vehicles in order to try and prevent automotive theft. In some vehicles, in some regions of the world, there are no vehicle security systems mandated. In some regions of the world, they are. Most vehicles have some form of an anti theft system. Now, in the United States and Australia, and I believe this is likely going to be in the UK as well in the future, there is what we refer to as NASTF. NASTF is National Automotive Service Task Force. The function that they currently serve is as an intermediary organization to facilitate the relationship between the vehicle manufacturers, the aftermarket scan tool manufacturers, and the government themselves. So, what they do is essentially try to facilitate that communication process, that cooperation between the different entities in support of the J2534 protocol and legislation, although it's not really legislation at this point. But in this facilitation, basically what we need to understand is there are certain functions that the vehicle manufacturers will tag or label internally inside their software as a security related function. Now, some of those functions are logical, right? Okay, I am replacing a steering lock. Okay, a steering lock is typically part of the vehicle immobilizer system, right? So if it's part of the vehicle immobilizer system, many vehicle manufacturers have essentially turned on something inside their software and inside their vehicle that says you cannot perform a replacement of this component or an adaptation of this component unless you have a certain set of security credentials. NASTF is currently the organization that vets people and provides this particular credential. Now, in other regions of the world, this may be different. It is also possible that there will become additional organizations that will provide this type of credentialing that will satisfy what the vehicle manufacturers require in order for us to gain access to the security information for vehicles and perform these protected functions in the future. Again, currently, there are a number of functions that get labeled by the vehicle manufacturers that require these special credentials. That is expanding in a lot of cases. So if you go to do J2534 programming and you don't realize that, let's say, for instance, Honda has arbitrarily decided when you replace a anti-lock brake system control module, Honda has decided on some vehicles that may be a security related function. And you're scratching your head going, why? Who knows? There's no real reason that we're given in the aftermarket as to the rationale for why, but it is important to understand that you don't know which functions or which modules are going to involve that necessary step of having these specialized credentials. You may go through, perform a programming of a given module, and when you get to the end of the line, there may be some form of a security relearn necessary. And if you don't have these necessary credentials, you will not be able to complete that relearn process. So, again, just important to understand this is why the organization exists currently. And the vehicle manufacturers are the ones that are dictating this. It's their hardware, it's their software. They make the rules. We have to find ways to make it work so that they will allow us to have access. And currently, NASTF is the intermediary that serves that function to get us the access we require to perform those protected functions. Now, again, we don't know. There's no master list of which modules require security access or anything like that. That is very, very, very unpublished in most cases. It would be great if the vehicle manufacturers would publish a master list or something like that to make life easier for us, right? Because of how much time it may or may not take to do a function, depending on whether or not it's security related. It's important to know, right? So each vehicle manufacturer is different. I make jokes all the time about the only consistent thing is inconsistency, and that's largely very true here with the vehicle manufacturers. It is also really important to understand if you're doing anything that's part of the immobilizer function chain, it's pretty safe to assume it's likely going to require something along these lines. Now, the German manufacturers like BMW, Mercedes Benz, Volkswagen, Audi generally do not use the specialized credential login. They perform their own vetting process when you apply for their software, and they prefer their authority over the authority of a secondary body such as NASTF, right? So the German manufacturers are usually different. Now, there are still things like, for instance, in Mercedes Benz, you do have to have those credentials from NASTF in the United States or Canada in order to purchase what Mercedes Benz labels as theft related parts. So if you try to purchase a theft related part, you have to have those NASTF credentials, or they will not allow you to purchase a given component from the dealer. So again, a lot of relevancy here. And as vehicle security becomes more of a goal of the vehicle manufacturers, you can trust that this will most likely become more of a thing as we go forward. So again, if you're just joining us, we're talking about J2534 in relation to the RLink Lite and the RLink J2534, and kind of going over the vehicle secure infrastructure discussion, as well as gateways and things of that nature. Do we have any questions on anything we've covered so far before we continue forward here? Okay, nothing I'm seeing coming in at the moment. So awesome. So for vehicle manufacturer software that is supported through the RLink Lite and the RLink J2534, this is your general master list, if you will. So we have a wide variety list here, right? We have Techline Connect, which is the standard GM software. We have Ford FJDS and FDRS. We have BMW ISTA. We have Volkswagen Audi Otis. We have Kia Hyundai Genesis J2534. Keep in mind, this particular J2534 software is going to be revised and released in a completely new version in the very near future, at least in the United States, and I would expect probably in other regions as well. Stellantis YTech 2.0, Toyota GTS Plus, Honda and Acura's IHDS, Subaru's FlashRite application, JLR Pathfinder SDD. They are working to make sure it supports Topics Cloud as well. Mercedes J2534 app, Nissan Consult 3 R2R, and NERS. NERS has been sunset, but there still is a functional offline version out there, and it does work with that. We are currently working on making it work with Consult 4, right to repair software, which should be done sometime in the near future here. And then also Mitsubishi MUT3 J2534. Now, Topdon has obtained approvals from Nissan for J2534. Basically, they have validated our device and said your device works properly with our software for Consult 3 R2R software. Again, the Consult 4 R2R software approval with the R-Links is underway and should be done sometime this year. Toyota approvals are also currently in process, and Topdon is seeking approvals with other vehicle manufacturers currently. So we're going to go to just one FAQ. Like I said, I foreshadowed this a little bit and mentioned we're just going to talk a little more about that FEPS programming so you have a really firm grip on what that is and whether or not it's going to be relevant to you specifically. So if you're working on a Ford, the easiest way to find out if it has FEPS and will require FEPS support in order to perform a programming of a module is go to the data link connector on the car, look at pin 13, check to see if that pin is occupied. If you see a pin and you see a wire coming out of the back, that means your vehicle most likely uses FEPS. If that pin is there, then you must use the RLink Lite in order to do programming. You cannot use the RLink J2534 because the RLink J2534 is not capable of producing the 18 volts that is used for FEPS program. So just keep that in mind. That is a common question we get, specifically with relation to Ford, and it is important that you understand that. Another thing we want to keep in mind if we're going to get into programming, we absolutely unequivocally must have a programming power supply. Programming power supplies are different from a conventional battery charger. Conventional battery chargers will vary the amount of current and the amount of voltage. The current will be variable based on the setting on the dial on a conventional battery charger. The voltage will move around a lot. We do not want our voltage moving around a lot when we are trying to program a module. We want a power supply that has a voltage we can set to a very specific level, and then the programming power supply will hold that rock steady. It's not going to allow a bunch of AC ripple. It's also not going to allow any major changes in voltage level. That is going to ensure, or at least give us the best possibility and percentages, that we will not corrupt a module, brick a module, or cause harm to the vehicle in any way. So you can use a Topdon T90,000, and that's suitable for most vehicles, with the rare exception of certain European vehicles. Some certain European vehicles, such as BMW F and G chassis and later vehicles, actually have programming power supply requirements above 90 amps, which is what the T90,000 is. So in those cases, the Topdon T120 is the unit you would want to choose. If you want to be protected to the future vehicles and be set up for everything out there right now, then the T120 is the solution you would want to choose for that. I've used both extensively, and I can tell you I've had great success with both. I'm a big fan of the T120, especially in the shop environment, since the T120 does, in fact, sit very nicely on a work cart. The T90,000, a lot of people really like for mobile stuff, simply because it's kind of like a little suitcase and you can carry it around. Now, you'll notice in the picture I have on the left here, you do want to keep in mind if you're using any extension cords of any kind, you do need to make sure that they are of the same or larger gauge as the cables coming out of the back of the T90,000 or the T120. Never ever do we want to reduce the gauge of wire that we are feeding power to either unit, as this could cause issues. We also want to keep in mind when we're connecting a programming power supply, many 120-volt outlets are designed specifically for only 15 amps of current. If you are doing a 90 amps or more programming event on a vehicle that may have a high demand, you're going to need at least a 20 amp breaker. Now, if you're not familiar, if you look at the outlet on your wall, usually the 20 amp breakers have not just the vertical slats, but they also have the cross slats on the actual prongs. If you're not sure if it's a 20 amp, I would go check your fuse box and make sure that it is a 20 amp breaker. Otherwise, if you happen to get too high of a current, you can pop your breaker. So just keep that in mind when you're doing programming. Couple of things we want to keep in mind with relation to the RLink, whether we're talking about the RLink Lite or the RLink J2534, there is no OEM software provided with the unit itself. You need to purchase the software from the vehicle manufacturer through their approved portals. It's also important to keep in mind that you need to have a specially set up laptop. If you're planning to program multiple vehicle brands, then you need to make sure that you have your software separated by partition or by separate laptop. If you'd like to have 5 laptops because you're going to program 5 different brands of cars, okay, that's fine. If you would prefer to have 1 or 2 laptops, then you're going to need to create a partitioning structure where each vehicle manufacturer software is separated. Now, for a long time, many vehicle manufacturer softwares could live together on the same partition. Unfortunately, that is becoming less and less true. As each vehicle manufacturer releases new softwares, we are running into issues where there are conflicts with vehicle manufacturer software on the same computer. Obviously, that is a tremendous problem, right? If we have a conflict, we could have issues being able to program or connect to a car and not really understand the why. Spoiler alert. If you call in to the vehicle manufacturer support line, so you call up General Motors, hey, General Motors, I need some help. My Tech Line Connect is not working with this car. They're going to ask you, number one, does your laptop meet the requirements that their website says it needs to, the physical hardware and software? Number two, does the software live by itself on a partition? If the answers to those questions is no, they are most likely going to tell you to get a different laptop and hang up the phone. It's important to understand that that can legitimately cause problems with programming, so you do need to make sure you understand this. Now, it's also important to understand every vehicle manufacturer has different laptop requirements. So GM may have a certain level of hardware required for their software. Ford or Volkswagen or BMW may have different requirements. BMW, for instance, is well known to have different requirements that are a little bit more picky. For instance, their software wants a very large amount of hard drive space open and available before they will even let you install their software. So, again, every vehicle manufacturer has different requirements as far as what they want from the hardware and the software of the given laptop. This is why we want to go to the vehicle manufacturers' websites, look at all of the different vehicle manufacturers we hope to program, and purchase a laptop that is within the requirement limits of all of the vehicle manufacturers that we are hoping to program. Now, there are organizations that will build you a ready made laptop that has all the proper partitioning, meets the hardware requirements of all the vehicle manufacturers, and is set up so that you can go and start off right away and be set the way you need to be. There's a number of different companies that do this. If you do some Google searching, you can find them. In the United States, there's Auto Rescue Tools and Equipment. There's AE Tools. There's CAS, and I can't remember what their Connected Automotive Systems or something like that. I can't remember their abbreviation, but there are a variety of companies that will make a laptop ready for you. And of course, it's important to understand that that comes at a cost, and it's not a small cost. It's also important to understand that you're probably going to want to have paid support because when you have these headaches and you're trying to perform programming, you can lose an astronomical amount of time and productivity simply trying to troubleshoot why doesn't the software work? Why doesn't the module program, et cetera, et cetera. If you do not have a dedicated support line to call for those types of issues, you are going to be in a world of hurt. It's important to understand Topdon support personnel can only assist with the RLink drivers themselves and the RLink hardware. They cannot assist you with how to program a car, how to program a module, or if there are general programming errors of the vehicle manufacturer's software, we are more than willing to send that information back to our engineering team and ask them if there's something potentially wrong with the RLink, the drivers. But in most cases, that is not the case. Typically, the majority of errors are born of vehicle manufacturer software is having a problem. Their network, the vehicle manufacturer's network, may be having a problem. There may be a mismatch in the part number on the vehicle. For instance, somebody has installed a used control unit or a remanufactured that doesn't have the correct part number. There's a clue there, right? Something else is broken. Yes, the drivers are the problem occasionally on J2534, but in a lot of cases, the problem is actually something else. So it's important to understand that. Now, here's just some foundational steps that I wanted to provide to you in order for you to have some level of comfort and confidence getting started. If you're planning to get into J2534, here are some basic things you want to go through, kind of like a checklist, right? So you want to make sure your laptop meets the OEM requirements for whatever OEMs you're planning to program. Make sure your laptop is either partitioned, so you have the software separated, or you have multiple laptops. Make sure you read the directions very carefully for each vehicle manufacturer's software. Why? Because each vehicle manufacturer has different requirements as far as the additional softwares you may need to install in order to make the OEM software function correctly. Some manufacturers call for things like, hey, we would like you to install C++ or .NET Framework, an older version of .NET Framework. And sometimes the vehicle manufacturer's software installation program will automatically install these. Sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, you need to be able to read that information that tells you how to set up the OE software. And then you need to be able to install that additional software. If you're going to use the RLink Lite to do your programming or the RLink J2534, we always want to make sure that we install the proper driver for the vehicle manufacturer we're working with. So if we're doing a Chrysler, we want to install the Chrysler driver through the RLink suite. Once we've installed the drivers, then we're going to install the OEM software. Now, again, make sure you check the OEM software installation instructions. Usually, you want the drivers for your J2534 device installed first, but not always. So make sure you check the directions. Once we've installed the OEM software, then we have to pair or connect to our RLink, and then we can go ahead and proceed with programming or diagnosis using the OEM software. So just want to show you an example of what you would see on a partitioned laptop. So once you have a partitioned laptop, essentially it's like having a bunch of individual hard drives all living on one giant piece of hardware. So in this particular picture, this is one of my laptops. I have partitions set up for a bunch of stuff. So I've got Kia Hyundai's on its own, GM is on its own, Toyota's on its own, Stellantis is on its own, and I have more. So if I click the see more operating systems, I actually have even more vehicle manufacturer softwares here than this. So on each of those partitions, Windows has been installed, and it is always recommended you use a professional version of Windows, Windows 10 or 11 professional. And then Each one of those partitions has a specific vehicle manufacturer's software, any additional software the vehicle manufacturer calls for. The drivers for my laptop have all been installed on each of these partitions, and the RLink suite has been installed on each of these partitions. Now, when we are installing the RLink drivers, it is really important to understand we need to make sure we turn off all of our antivirus, we turn off all of our firewalls. All of that needs to be disabled in your Windows settings, not only when you install the driver package, but also when you install the OEM software and when you go to operate the OEM software. Many vehicle manufacturers have very specific firewall requirements. Most OEM software has moved to what we would call cloud-based architecture. Because the majority of OEM software is now cloud-based architecture, that means when you boot the software up on your laptop, what's happening? The software is reaching out over the internet, talking to the database of the vehicle manufacturer, pulling information. If your firewall is turned on, guess what happens? You can disrupt the communication, you can corrupt the data, you can prevent it from functioning altogether. And that is all a direct result of not disabling the antivirus and the firewall correctly. Now, when we turn off an antivirus and a firewall, is this a laptop we should be using for general internet browsing? No, it is not. So when you set up your programming laptop, it is important that that become a dedicated laptop for programming, not a general use laptop. Why? Because if we're going to turn off the antivirus and the firewall and we're going to open it up and essentially make it open to the internet, we should not be general browsing on the internet then, because we could easily introduce a virus that could damage the computer and or cause a number of security problems for us. Keep that in mind. Really, really crucial. And then the last bullet point we see here, again, we talked about this already a little bit. Every vehicle manufacturer's software may have additional software requirements as far as things you need to install that are not included with the OEM software and have to be manually installed by you, the person who's setting up the laptop, or by any professional organization you are paying to set a laptop up for you. These softwares vary as far as which vehicle manufacturer needs which one. None of these cost any money, so it is good to keep that in mind. Java is free, C++ is free, .NET Framework, the older legacy versions, those are free. They don't cost you any additional money, but you do have to understand that you may need to install them on many vehicle manufacturers' softwares. So now, where do we get our drivers for the RLink? The number one place you always want to go for any software downloads related to any Topdon product is going to be www.topdon.com. That website is always going to get you the latest updated software and going to have any related driver packages that you might need. So you're going to find the RLink Lite or the RLink J2534. You're going to click on the download section, and then you're going to download the latest version of the suite. Now, currently on the website, we have two versions. We have the current latest version, and we have one trailing version. Why do we have two versions? Well, whenever new software gets released, there is inevitably going to be something unanticipated that may not work correctly, right? Doesn't matter what software we're talking about. Windows operating system, Mac operating system, vehicle manufacturer diagnostic software, scan tool software. It doesn't matter. If it's a software, there is always the possibility that there will be an error that a programming specialist cannot anticipate. Because of this, we now have a trailing version of the driver package also on the website. So if you install the latest version and you have an issue, you can always roll back one version and then retry whatever you're doing. And in many cases, that may or may not resolve the problem. So hopefully you understand the rationale for why we have two versions. Now, you always want to start by using the newest and latest and greatest, and only go to an older version if there is an absolutely specific need or a various issue you're trying to resolve. That is the only reason you would ever use an older version of a software. Now, if you're wondering where to get the OEM software for programming or diagnosis, again, that's going to vary by region. For instance, Volkswagen has different websites for different regions, right? So in the USA, it's vw.irwin.com, if I remember correctly. But in other countries, it might be something else, right? The suffix of the website could be .uk or .co or who knows what, right? Make sure you're on the website for the software for the vehicle manufacturer for your specific region, because again, it's going to be different by every vehicle manufacturer. Some of them have a global software that works the same everywhere. Some of them have a software that is specific to region. So make sure you are on the specific site for your given region. The other thing important to remember there is if you purchase the wrong software and you connect to the car, it's possible the software will not recognize the car because your car is from a different region than that software is designed for. Just keep that in mind. These are the places where you can find the software for USA. Canada, a lot of the links are the same. Many other regions of the world, again, you need to do a little bit of legwork. I live in the US, so I'm not as familiar with the other outlets for software in other places. Of course, feel free to drop any links in the comments. This is going to be on YouTube, this entire video. So if you want to drop some links in the comments of the places you go to get the correct software, again, please only post links for legitimate OEM solutions. We only encourage and condone the use of legitimate OEM software. So once we go to start our programming, we want to do everything with a process, right? If we want to have the most success on anything we do, whether it's diagnostics, whether it's programming, whether it's baking a loaf of bread, having a process has a ton of value. This ensures that you're going to have consistent results. It also affords you the opportunity that if you're making a mistake or you're running into a common problem, you can look at your process and ask yourself, is there something I can do different in my process to help me avoid making that mistake repeatedly in the future? And if the answer is yes, awesome. Now you can make that change and fix that for the future. So the first thing we do on anything we do, diagnosis or programming, we should always pre-scan the vehicle and save that. Of course, you can do this with your Topdon Phoenix Series scan tool. You can use the Top Scan Pro, anything that you have that's an all system scanner. Pre-scan the vehicle, save it before you do any work to the car. Then we're going to make sure we charge up the battery. So if this is a single 12-volt battery or a dual 12-volt battery, we should charge the batteries before we undergo any programming functions or diagnosis for that matter. Then we should turn on our programming power supply, set it to the voltage that the vehicle manufacturer specifies. Now, some vehicle manufacturers do actually tell you, hey, when you do programming, we want the voltage set to blank. Some vehicle manufacturers don't specify. If there's no specification provided, usually 13.6 is a pretty safe standard. Then we're going to connect our laptop directly to Ethernet. So if we're going to do programming, we want to make sure that we're not using Wi-Fi. Why? There's always a possibility that corruption could happen to the software or the files that we are downloading when we go to do the programming. So we want to use hardwired Ethernet to our laptop to ensure the highest reliability and the least chance of something going wrong. Now, you also need to make sure the vehicle doesn't go to sleep during your programming session. Again, this varies by vehicle. Every vehicle manufacturer is different. I would encourage you to read the service information and look for technical service bulletins, as many times they may outline a process or a procedure on how to do this. So these are the common ways that disabling the vehicle going to sleep is usually accomplished. Turning on the flashers, turning on the headlights, keeping the driver's door open, buckling the seatbelt, sitting on the seat so the seat weight sensor detects weight, depressing the brake pedal. Also, sometimes some manufacturers have you put the vehicle in neutral with the parking brake on. So every vehicle manufacturer is different. But with the push button start vehicles, a lot of them need you to do something like this or some combination of these in order to ensure the car does not automatically switch off the ignition, which of course we do not want happening while we're trying to program a module. Once we've done our programming, we want to make sure that we validate whether or not the programming was successful. If we did a programming update in order to address a problem like a technical service bulletin, we want to make sure, number one, that the software that's in the module when we're done actually matches what the technical service bulletin says. Number two, We also want to make sure that if there was a symptom or a code that we were trying to address, we want to make sure that that is now gone and does not come back, right? We always want to validate anything we're doing. And lastly, once we've validated and proven the car is good to go, we want to scan the vehicle one more time on all systems after we've cleared the faults and put the vehicle back into normal operation so that we have proof. Yep, the vehicle's fixed. Everything we were trying to address has been resolved, and now we can proceed forward, right? So, again, this is just a basic procedure we want to try to adhere to if we're looking to have consistent results. So, I'm going to pause now and see if we have any questions. I'm not currently seeing any. Yeah, the part about having to keep the vehicle awake is irritating, isn't it? And it's funny because some vehicle manufacturers, as long as you have stable voltage, it won't shut off because the whole point of shutting off the key is to save or protect the vehicle electrical system, aka the 12-volt battery, right? So if you had stable power supply and you had a battery current monitoring sensor that could measure and determine the battery's not being discharged, why would you shut off the key, right? Or the ignition? Go figure. I would call that poor engineering. Just my 2 cents. All right. So we're going to do a programming demonstration for you here. Uh, we don't have a lot of time left, but I think I can blow through this one pretty quick. So we are going to do a GM. And this is something pretty garden variety. This is not a difficult programming and a good introduction. Yes, by all means, if you do have questions, feel free to hit us up after the chat here or when we're done with the webinar. If it's not related specifically to this particular scenario, we're always happy. I'm on Facebook. I'm pretty easy to find. You're welcome to message me on there if you like. Happy to help with that. So we're going to go through this one. We'll try to go through it pretty quick so that we can try and get through it all. So once we've installed the GM software, we're not going to take you through the installation procedure. That would take a lot of time to go through. GM software is all web based now. So you log into their portal, you purchase a subscription. Basically, the way they're currently doing it is you purchase a token for programming for a VIN and you pay a specific rate per VIN. And then once you pay that token fee, then you can program modules on that given vehicle up to a certain number of times and a certain number of modules. So we boot up the GM software. You can see here, we're going to click the interface button up in the top left. Then we'll get a little pop-up here. They call that the device explorer. And most J2534 softwares have some form of interface connectivity like this, right? Where you have to select the vehicle communication interface, aka your J2534. So we're going to select our Topdon RLink, and then we're going to hit continue after we've selected it. So now we're going to plug it into the car. We're going to plug the USB on the RLink into the computer. We're going to plug in the Ethernet into the computer. And then we're going to hit the little car button in the top left, and we're going to connect to the vehicle. Once we connect to the vehicle, we should get an automatic VIN acquisition, and it should identify the vehicle that will match with your vehicle. Make sure you check the VIN that it pulls from the car against the door plate on the car. Why? Well, if somebody's been in there before you and potentially put a used module in the vehicle, you very much could have a mismatch with the VIN. So this is your opportunity to avoid a lot of issues. Check the VIN that gets pulled by the tool against the vehicle itself. Make sure those match. If it doesn't, don't go any further. Find out why you have a VIN mismatch before you do anything else. So now, once we've done the connection here and we have the vehicle identified, now we're going to go to SPS2, which is the little icon with the computer with SPS in the center. We're going to click on that. You can see we have our VIN in the top left here, and we have the vehicle ID. You can also have it redetect it or manually enter it if it's not detecting correctly. So we click on the SPS button. Now, when we click on the SPS button, we're going to have some different options. GM often gives you a couple of different options. You have a reprogram button and you have a replace and reprogram button. Some modules have one option only, some modules have two options. And there may be more options added in the future. So keep in mind, whatever we show here in the webinar today may change tomorrow. General Motors may revise the process, they may release brand new software. So just keep in mind that no matter what we go through, it's important to understand it may change tomorrow. So we look here, and if the module is brand new, what are we going to do? We're going to do replace and reprogram. If this module is used, for instance, and we've cloned it, which is what we did on this particular vehicle, we cloned this ECM, and now we're going to update the software on it. So we're simply reprogramming the software. Now, it's also important to note here, before we undergo any programming procedure, you should always read the service information from the vehicle manufacturer and make sure to check for technical service bulletins. There are often revisions to the programming process that are laid out in a technical service bulletin or in the service information. So you always want to make sure you understand that because that is very crucial in terms of your steps. Your steps can change based on a TSB. Your steps can change based on service information. So once we've selected the appropriate selection here, we're going to hit next. And then you're going to be given a list of modules to choose from. And again, this is not uncommon on a lot of vehicle manufacturers' software. Oftentimes, you will be given a master list of modules that you can program, and you have to select the appropriate module. So in this case, we're doing the engine control module. So we're going to select engine control module. And you notice there's also some additional options in the functioning. So we have programming or we have setup. Again, if you don't know which one does what, should be checking service information, should be checking for technical service bulletins. In this case, we're doing programming. Setup is something that might consist of relearns or adaptations or things of that nature. But again, if you're not familiar, you should definitely be checking your service information in TSBs. So we're going to do programming, and it's normal programming, and then we're going to hit next. So once we hit next, we'll have a screen that'll pop up and give us all of the calibrations in the module, and then we can generate a PDF like this. And this PDF in GM allows us to see what the current calibrations that are written to the module are. And then we can also see what the latest available is based on the selections we made in the menu. So you can see the module we're connected to here is missing 2 calibrations. Now that is likely because it was a cloned module. So under the selected section, these are the different numbers of the new calibrations that are going to be written to the module. And if all of these numbers were identical, then we would not need to do any programming, right? If they're different, then we want to make sure that the selected versions on the right are the newer versions. So here's your list, and you can see here what the picture looks like as far as the different options. Up on the top here, we have a list of calibrations that apply to this specific module. And you can click on each one of these boxes to see how many times the software has been revised. And if you look down here on this middle section, the index, you can see that this one calibration here has been updated a number of times. Down on the very bottom, they also give you a history that tells you why or kind of the history of why it's been changed, right? New calibration to enhance function, new calibration to address a particular fault code, maybe in reference to a recall or a technical service bulletin. So again, some vehicle manufacturers may provide this context or detail, some don't. But in GM, they do, generally speaking. Again, as of right now, may change tomorrow. So once we have all the appropriate calibrations selected, and again, we always want to select the newest unless we're instructed to do otherwise. We're going to go ahead and hit next. And again, here's just a little footnote. You can see when we're clicked on this particular one, it gives us the history. And you can look at this history data a little bit more in detail. You could also Google search these calibration numbers if you wanted to see if there was a technical service bulletin. And if you just wanted more context about the rationale for the why it's been changed, you might be able to find that. Okay, so we have all of our different calibrations checked. We want to make sure they're all selected before we proceed, right? If we only want to write some of those, then we could uncheck some of them as desired. And once we've selected all the ones we want to do, then we can hit next, and then the programming is going to initiate. Once the programming initiates, again, it's very crucial. We do not disturb the vehicle in any way, shape, or form, and we make sure that we let the computer do what it needs to do. Now, here's a note. When we're doing programming, number one, that laptop better be plugged into AC power. Number two, another reason we want to have Windows Professional. Make sure you edit your power plan as well as your Windows updates. You need to make sure that the computer is not permitted to restart for any reason during this. You also need to make sure that the computer is not permitted to go to sleep for any reason during this, right? If you look at Windows Power Management, there's a number of different settings you need to change. You cannot let the computer go to sleep at any time when it's plugged into AC power. You cannot let the computer shut off USB for any reason to save power, right? If it shuts off the USB, what happens to your VCI? It loses connection. That could corrupt or brick a module, right? Keep that in mind. You also need to make sure that the hard drive cannot go to sleep, because most OEM softwares are going to download those flash files onto your hard drive, and then they're going to push those files through your J2534 into the car. If the hard drive is allowed to go to sleep, how is that going to allow the programming to complete successfully? Again, things to keep in mind throughout this process. Once the programming is completed, you're going to see on GM, they will generate a warranty claim code card like this. Now, if you are installing any module in a vehicle on a GM, it's a good idea to save this. And in many cases, like for instance, if you're installing a remanufactured transmission, some of the remanufacturers of those transmissions will actually require you to provide this as proof that you performed the most recent flash calibration to the transmission control module in order for them to allow to validate your warranty on that remanufactured transmission. Again, every vehicle manufacturer is different. Every remanufacturer of components may have different standards or requirements, and every single specific module may have different steps. So again, this is not meant to be like, hey, you can use what we're talking about here as a law on every car. No, it's going to be different. But understand that what you need to do in terms of documentation may vary depending on what job you're doing. Another example would be Nissan. So with Nissan, if you replace a transmission on one of their vehicles, most of the time you have to follow a technical service bulletin that has a bunch of steps that are very picky and specific. And if you do not follow every one of those steps exactly and screen record the entire process to prove you followed the entire process correctly, they will void your warranty on the transmission. So again, every vehicle manufacturer is different. Every vehicle or every aftermarket remanufacturing company is different. You want to make sure you do your research before you engage in the programming event. Now, when I do GM, one other thing I do is I will exit out of the session and basically go back in and connect to the car again, like I'm starting all over, and then start over the programming process once more. And this will make the software recheck the module for calibrations. Then, when I get to the calibration screen, I can look and see, is everything that's in the module now after I flashed it and updated it identical to the latest version it's supposed to have? If the answer is yes, I'm happy, I'm good to go. If the answer is no, then for whatever reason, the flash did not complete correctly, and I need to start the programming process back over and try reflashing it again. Once we've completed the flash process on a given module, then we need to make sure, just like I mentioned before, we want to make sure we clear all the faults right after the programming. We want to make sure we cycle the key, test drive the vehicle, document everything, just like one of our viewers is talking about here, right? Document everything, right? It's a good policy. Make sure that everything is working properly. Make sure whatever module you have replaced, installed, or updated is working properly. Make sure any issues you were attempting to resolve with a reflash have been resolved. If if you know the fault code you were trying to fix, know what the triggering criteria are. Put the vehicle through that battery of conditions again to verify the fault doesn't come back. Then, when you're all done with all of that, rescan the vehicle once more and save it. And save that post scan so you know the vehicle is fixed. Now you're ready to disconnect from the car and the programming is fully completed, right? Okay. So, hopefully, you learned something through our webinar today. Again, the goal here was to give you some really good base level competency on J2534, get you comfortable and familiar with all the different requirements you have to truly understand before you go connecting to the car and mashing buttons, right? It's very important to understand this. Otherwise, things can go very sideways very quickly, and you can end up in a world of hurt. Not only could you end up having to buy additional modules because of something going wrong, but you could also end up wasting a very large volume of time, which, of course, time is money. If you are doing this professionally, it is crucial that you always remember that. And that is why you want to make sure you understand these requirements before you get into the world of J2534 programming. So, hopefully, you learned something on the RLink Lite and the RLink J2534, as well as J2534 in general. If you have more questions on the subject, please don't hesitate to, give our hotline a call, 833, the number 4, Topdon in the US and Canada. If you are in other regions, reach out to your regional distributor for support. And of course, you can also visit topdon.com and send in a support request through the website there if you're in a global region. And of course, they will be happy to answer those questions and try to help you as needed. Really appreciate you taking the time to come to the webinar today. And of course, we do these once a month. So we'll have another one for you again next month. And we look forward to seeing you there. And as always, I'm Hawken with Topdon. So thanks again for attending. And we'll see you on the next webinar.